Think about a time in the past when you're experiencing physical pain, or perhaps you're experiencing it right now. And the question is, when you did experience that or are experiencing that, how did you deal with it? This is the Teach Mindfulness podcast. My name is Shamash Aladina, and we're talking about how to manage physical pain. And in particular, as a new mindfulness teacher or thinking about being a mindfulness teacher, how do you help your students with their physical pain and to navigate it with mindfulness? Well, first of all, if they are going through pain, you do need to make sure that they've checked with their doctor that they're okay and there isn't some underlying issue that they need to deal with medically. But if it's a chronic pain, which is often defined as a long-term pain, I think 6 months or more, um, that's really difficult. It's very, very stressful, isn't it? So, does mindfulness have anything to offer for people going through this physical pain? And I would say a big yes. In fact, the 8-week course, which was originally researched and ended up helping to make mindfulness popular, mindfulness based stress reduction, worked a lot with people with physical pain and chronic pain. And it was found to be really, really helpful. It was one of the areas where it was found to be most helpful, surprisingly helpful. And in fact, John Kabat-Zinn, he used mindfulness for his own pain. He was going through, I think, quite a lot of back pain, and he happened to be on a mindfulness retreat, and the back pain reduced significantly. That's when he realized that maybe we could share these techniques with the public, with anyone who is going through a challenge. So when we do experience pain, first thing to share with yourself and your students is how you react to it. Now, a pain is obviously by definition unpleasant. And so the temptation is to run away from it, to fight it, to hide it, to get rid of it, probably taking some sort of medication to get rid of it, perhaps, or to do all sorts of things to avoid it. Everything from, alcohol or drugs to distractions, anything to not experience it. But mindfulness says something really radical, which is surprising because you wouldn't think that this would work. But mindfulness actually says, what if you actually feel the pain, if you actually notice it, become curious about it and let it be there and make space for it. And the idea is not to get rid of the pain as such. The pain will probably come and go. And if it's not one pain, it'll be another one. But if we can learn to relate to it and to cultivate the attitudes of mindfulness, and some of them that are really important, I will outline. One is curiosity. So to go from a state of mind of avoidance, anger, frustration, fighting the pain, what about curiosity? Like, oh, that's interesting. Where am I feeling this pain? What's the actual location of it in my body? What's the shape of it? What's the color? What's the texture? If it had a smell, what it would be? What happens if I feel it together with my breathing? What if I imagine breathing into and out of this pain? So these are the kind of words and languages that you can share with your students, particularly if they're going through pain. And the other thing you want to encourage and be clear about is it's not to get rid of the pain, because it starts becoming yet another technique to get rid of it. But this is not a technique to get rid of it. This is a technique to relate to this sensation in a different way. And what does tend to happen is that because we're relating to it in a more mindful way, it may diminish, it may not. But we need to be very clear that our motivation isn't to get rid of it. The motivation can be to reduce the suffering, which is the extra thoughts and emotions that we put on top of the physical pain that are unhelpful, the fight or flight response. So the idea is to reduce that if we can, that's okay. But the actual core sensation itself, we don't have a choice about that so much. So it's about making space to allow it to be there. So curiosity is a big one. Another one is kindness, to be kind to ourselves as we feel it, to be kind to ourselves as a whole when we're going through physical pain, because it's not easy as a human being to experience that. So you can invite your students to maybe place their hand on their heart if that feels okay for them, or to place their hand on the point where there's a physical pain if they can, and let their hand represent kindness. And the kindness and acceptance, they kind of go hand in hand. And I've mentioned acceptance before as being a very important, fundamental aspect of mindfulness. So you want to cultivate acceptance, kindness, letting this sensation be as it is, breathing into it. And then another thing that you can do that's a bit different is if you do something like a body scan, that can be quite interesting because of, rather than being fixated on just the sensation of pain, they're refocusing their attention. They're developing the skill to be able to move their attention to different parts of the body, and to flexibly and fluidly and voluntarily move our attention from one place to another is an important skill. It's a mindful skill. It's in ACT, it's called a contacting the present moment skill. It's a flexibility skill. It's good for our well-being. So that can actually be a good approach too. But the key is not to try to eliminate it, but to, in a sense, make peace with the sensation. Because yes, it's a difficult sensation, but on the other hand, it's also just a sensation, and it is impermanent. Sometimes it's stronger, sometimes it's weaker, and our students may not notice that until they've tuned into it. They may start to notice what impacts it, like the way they treat themselves, or the food that they eat, or the exercise they do, or the sleep that they have, or how they spend their time. They can start to become sensitive to how everything they do in their life relates to this pain that they are experiencing. And maybe as they start to look after their health in different ways, it impacts the level of pain they experience, for example. So there's some thoughts about working with pain. There's lots that we can talk about it, and there's probably all sorts of programs and guided meditations for managing pain. But there's some things to start with to explore with your students. It's essentially all the same mindfulness skills, and just reminding your students that this is radically different to what you'd normally do with pain. People would normally think of all sorts of different ways of getting rid of it. But we even can go far as saying pain can be your teacher. You can learn something. You can be present with it. Just reminded of someone that I know who suffers from a lot of pain and chronic pain. And he says how it is his greatest teacher, and how through that experience he is almost forced to be mindful all the time. And so all of his mindful skills and being present and compassion all comes from having that experience of chronic pain and meeting it in a mindful way. So although it can be deeply unpleasant, at the same time it can be our greatest teacher as well. So it gives an opportunity to, and it's a different way of seeing it, isn't it? Rather than just getting rid of it straight away by taking a tablet or something else. And that's not to say there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with, certainly nothing wrong with taking medication if we're going through difficulties and challenges. That's an important part of self-care and kindness too. But we're just saying that there's something for us to learn from physical pain. And there's some ideas and thoughts to share with your students. I've written about managing physical pain in one of my books, Mindfulness for Dummies. You can check that out. And as well as The Mindful Way Through Stress. And many other mindful books probably talk about it too. All right, thanks so much for listening to the Teach Mindfulness podcast. Check out teachmindfulnessonline.com if you want to learn to be a mindfulness teacher and join our community. And do send me a message. Let me know how you're finding this. I'd love to know if it's helpful, and then I can continue. All right. See you in the next one.